animal nightmare, the parent of the relatively tiny thing whose perfume had disabled the girl. Its huge and gorgeous blossom was supported by a long, flexible, writhing stem, and its base was composed of many and highly specialized leaves. There were saws and spears and mighty but sinuous tendrils. There were slender shoots which seemed to possess some sense of perception. There was the massive tractor base composed of extensible leaves, which by their contraction and expansion propelled the mass along the ground. Parent and child fell upon the hexaped, and soon bones and hair were all that remained. The slender shoots then wandered about the unconscious girl in her strange covering, and as a couple of powerful tendrils coiled about her and raised her into the air over the monstrous base of the thing, its rudimentary brain could almost be perceived working as it sluggishly realized that, now full fed, it should carry this other victim along, to feed its other offspring when they should return to its side. Barely outside the door of the Forlorn Hope, Stevens whirled about with a bitter imprecation. He had already lost time needlessly. With a lookout plate he could cover more ground in 10 minutes than he could cover a foot in a week. He flipped on the power and shot the violet beam out over the plateau to the district where he knew Nadia was wont to hunt. Not finding her there, he swung the beam in an ever-widening circle around that district. Finally, he saw a few freshly broken twigs and scanned the scene with care. He soon found the trail of fresh blood which marked the path of the flight of the hexaped, and with the peculiar maneuverability of the device he was using, it was not long until he was studying the scene where the encounter had taken place. He gasped when he saw the bones and perceived 3 of Nadia's arrows, but soon saw that the skeleton was not human and was reassured. Casting about in every direction, he found Nadia's bow, and saw a peculiar, freshly trampled path leading from the kill, past the bow, down the alley. He could not understand the spoor, but it was easily followed, and he shot the beam along it at a headlong speed until he came up with the monstrous creature that was making it, until he saw what burden that organism was carrying. He leaped to the controls of the lifeboat, then dropped his hand. While the stream of power now flowing was ample to operate the lookout plates, yet it would be many hours before the accumulator cells would be in condition to drive the craft even that short distance. "It'll take over an hour to get there. Here's hoping I can check in all X," he muttered savagely, as he took careful note of the location and direction of the creature's trail and set off at a fast jog-trot. The carnivorous flower's first warning that all was not well was received when Stephen's steel-shod feet landed squarely upon its base, and one sweeping cut of his sword lopped off the malignant blossom and severed the 2 tendrils that still held the unconscious Nadia. With a quick heave of his shoulder, he tossed her lightly backward into the smooth-beaten track the creature had made and tried to leap away. But the instant he had consumed in rescuing the girl had been enough for the thing to seize him, and he found himself battling for his very life. No soft-leaved infant this, but a full-grown monster, well equipped with mighty weapons of offense and defense. Well it was for the struggling man that he was encased in armor steel, as those saw-edged, hard-spiked leaves drove against him with crushing force. Well it was for him that he had his own independent air supply, so that the deadly perfume eddied ineffective about his helmeted head. Hard and fiercely driven as those terrible thorns were, they could do no more than dent his heavy armor. His powerful left arm, driving the double razor-edged dirk in short, resistless arcs, managed to keep the snaky tendrils from coiling about his right arm, which was wielding the heavy, trenchant sword. Every time that mighty blade descended, it cleaved its length through the snapping spikes and impotently grinding leaves. But more than once, a flailing tendril coiled about his neck armor and held his helmet immovable as though in a vice, while those frightful, grinding saws sought to rip their way through the glass to the living creature inside the peculiar metal housing. Dirk and saber and magnificent physique finally triumphed, but it was not until each leaf was literally severed from every other leaf that the outlandish organism gave up the ghost. Nadia had been tossed out into pure air, beyond the zone of the stupefying perfume, and she recovered her senses in time to see the finish of the battle. Stevens, assured that his foe was hors de combat, turned toward the spot where he had thrown Nadia's body. He saw that she was unharmed, and sprang toward her in relief. He was surprised beyond measure, however, to see her run away at a pace he could not hope to equal, encumbered as he was, motioning frantically at him the while to keep away from her. He stopped, astounded, and started to unscrew his helmet, whereupon she dashed back toward him, signaling him emphatically to leave his armor exactly as it was. He stood still and stared at her, an exasperated question large upon his face, until she made clear to him that he was to follow her at a safe distance. Then she set off at a rapid walk. She led him back to where the hexaped had fallen, where she retrieved her bow and arrows. Then, keeping a sharp lookout upon all sides, she went on to a small stream of water. She made the dumbfounded man go out into the middle of the creek and lie down and roll over in the water, approaching him, sniffing cautiously between immersions. She made him continue the bathing until she could detect not even the slightest trace of the sweet but noxious fragrance of that peculiarly terrible form of Ganymedean life. Only then did she allow him to remove his helmet, so that she could give him the greeting for which they both had longed, and tell him what it was all about. "So that's it, Ace!" he exclaimed, still holding her tightly in his iron embrace. "Great balls of fire! I thought maybe you were still a little cuckoo. Anesthetic perfume, huh? Hot stuff, I'd say. No wonder you bit. I would too. It was lucky for us I was airtight. We'd both be Stop it!" she interrupted him sharply. "Forget it. Don't ever even think of it." "All X, Ace. It's out like the well-known light. What to do? It's getting darker than a hat, and we're a long way from home. Don't know whether I could find my way back in the dark or not. Just between you and me, I'm not particularly keen on night travel in these parts, after what's just happened. Are you?" "Anything else but," she assured him fervently. "I'd lots rather stay hungry until tomorrow." "No need of that. I brought along enough supper for both of us. I'm hungry as a wolf, too, now that I have time to think of it. We'll eat and den up somewhere, or climb a tree. Those wampuses probably can't climb trees." "There's a nice little cave back there about 100 meters. We'll pretend it's the Ritz." And they soon had a merry fire blazing in front of the retreat. There they ate of the provisions Stevens had brought. Then, while the man rolled up boulders before the narrow entrance of the cave, Nadia gathered leaves and made a soft bed upon its warm, dry floor. "Good night, lover," and the girl, untroubled and secure now that Stevens was at her side, was almost instantly asleep. But the man was not sleepy. He thought of the power plant, even now sending its terrific stream of energy into his accumulators. He thought of the ultra-radio. Where could he get all the materials needed? He thought of his friends, wondering whether or not they would receive his message. He thought of Breckenridge and the other human beings who had been aboard the Arcturus, wondering poignantly as to their fate. He thought of Newton and of his own people, who had certainly given them up for dead long since. But above all, he thought of the beautiful, steel-true companion lying there asleep at his mailed feet, and he gazed down at her, his heart in his eyes. The firelight shone through the chinks between the boulders, casting a flickering ruddy light throughout the little cavern. Nadia lay there, her head pillowed upon one strong brown little hand. Her lips were red and sweetly curved. Her cheek was smooth and firm as so much brown velvet. She was literally aglow with sheer beauty and with perfect health, and the man reflected, as he studied her hungrily, that this wild life certainly had agreed with her. She was becoming more surpassingly beautiful with every passing day.